Good morning, good morning, good morning. Today we're talking about what happens when things fall apart. I know that we all would like this idea of living a stress-free, suffering-free, challenge-free life. But that's not the way it works. That's not a glitch in the matrix. I know that sometimes we would like to just have a smooth ride, but if you had a smooth mountain, you would never be able to climb it. You you need the ridges and you need the rocky terrain in order for you to be able to grip something and to be able to use that grip to pull you towards the desires of your heart, to pull you towards your destination. And so the challenge is the rough terrain is built into the game, as it were, if you were to think of this as a video game or something, so that the grit builds your character. The grit builds your resilience, your stamina, your persistence, etc. And so sometimes we spend months, even sometimes years, building up something only for it to fall apart. Whether it's a marriage, whether it's a career, whether it's a project, you had a vision of your life going a particular way and it didn't turn out that way. And then you're thinking, well, what sense does it make to even continue trying if I'm not going to get my way, if I'm not going to get what I want, et cetera, et cetera. So let's unpack that. Let's unpack the unspoken expectations and the unspoken bargaining that we sometimes do in order to move through the world. So I'm going to use my own family as an example. A couple of years ago, in 2021, my brother passed away from ALS, my sister's husband. And it wasn't sudden, right? This was like a 6-year, 7-year journey in the making. It first started with really subtle symptoms that we just attributed to him being klutz, that to him being, not paying attention to where he was going, et cetera, because he would fall or because he would slip or because he couldn't hang on to something and it would drop from his hand, et cetera, et cetera. And we were all happy when my sister introduced us to her then boyfriend, eventually husband and father of her children. We were all very happy because it's like, this is a stand-up guy, and we're very happy that she finally found somebody that makes her happy, et cetera, et cetera. And, you're kind of like expecting a happily ever after. They're going to get married and they're going to have children and they're going to just live this long life as husband and wife and everything's going to be copacetic. So ALS was a little bit of a curveball into an otherwise fairy tale. And my sister's life as his full-time caregiver soon became a nightmare, an unrelenting pull from first one child, then they got pregnant with the second one, and now you're handling toddlers and you're handling a man that needs full-time care and is rapidly deteriorating before your very eyes. So this fairy tale is slipping from your hands and there's nothing you can do about it. There's not a drink you can take. There's not a diet you can follow. There's not a prayer you can say. There's nothing you can do about it. This is what's happening. This man is dying from ALS, eventually will die, now has died, and now we're 3 years on the other side of his passing. And I remember going to her house the day that he passed. She called me. She was like, I think he's gone. I was at my mom's house and I raced over to her house. And then when I opened the door, I had to pass the master's, the primary bedroom where he was, and I saw him lying there. And it was a shock because that was the first time that I had ever seen Mustafa with no signs of life. Like not even sleeping is that level of lifeless. When I went to the back room, to the living room, the little one, um, he was like maybe, I want to say 4 at the time. He's like, hi, Peter, Dad is dead. I'll never forget that. Like, because he's 4, he couldn't really quite grasp what was happening. I mean, he knew that his dad was sick, but he didn't quite grasp what that meant, that dad is gone forever. And in the inside of the bedroom, my sister and the older one were just in wretched tears on the floor, hugging each other, waiting for me to come so that I could just kind of like hold space while the bus took the body away. And then you're like, this wasn't the deal. This wasn't the deal. The deal was that I'm supposed to be a good person. I'm supposed to do the right things. I'm supposed to be honest. I'm supposed to raise a family. I'm supposed to love this man. I'm supposed to take care of what I have to take care of. And in return, life, God, you're supposed to take care of me. You're supposed to make sure that I'm happy. You're supposed to make sure that this man treats me right. You're supposed to make sure that my children grow up to be productive members of society that I can be proud of. Like there's a deal that we had in our head that if I do these things, I'll get these things. And when things fall apart, it rocks you to your core about the nature of your faith, the nature of transactions that we wouldn't call transactions, but that's how we operate, right? I give this, you give me that. I don't know that she has any more answers than she did 3 years ago. I don't know that I do. But what has opened up for me in that whole experience is that when you put those pieces, just like in on the rock on the mountain, when you're climbing a mountain, when you put the pieces together, this rock that made your foot slip, but now you're hanging on to it to grip to go to another side, to go higher on that mountain of your own evolution. Those pieces that broke your heart have also made you tender and compassionate to the human experience. If you let them, they could also make you sarcastic and cynical. But they have the possibility of making you tender and compassionate to the human experience. They also make you more patient. Because a lot of times the magic is there, you just have to keep, like, you know what I mean? If you were to take a trip from your house to the airport to another destination and you stopped at the corner of your house, and then because you stopped moving, you thought, oh, then that must mean that there's no such destination, and that must mean that I'm not meant to get there. No, you stopped. The destination is available. You stop moving, right? There's a way to get to the airport and get to the plane and get to your Hawaii vacation. You stop moving, and you're gonna miss your flight if you stop moving. And so it allows you to build that persistence and that resilience and that keep going muscle. When things fall apart, it allows you to check your assumptions. There are some assumptions out of which you are operating that perhaps are incorrect, inaccurate, incomplete, completely misleading. Right? Maybe you were missing some context. To give you another example of missing context, I was in a conversation with a few clients of mine, and we were talking about in the reporting of the data that we needed. They're in the business of buying and selling businesses. And in the process of buying and getting ready to sell them, there's a build-up process where some coaches come in and build the business to, profitability and operational subsistence and so forth before they can actually sell them. What we wanted to know, as the coaches that were in that bridge, who are these businesses and how much of them do you own, so that we know what your vested interest in. And she put in the notes, she put, create a list of who we own, right? And my black butt, it's like, no, not who you own. We don't own people no more. We want a list of the businesses that you own. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't mean it like that. Da, 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 da. So there was context that she was missing because it didn't occur to her. She didn't do that with any kind of malice. That wasn't quote unquote a racist comment. It was, she didn't read the room. A whole bunch of, people who in another century would have been people you're talking about. And so sometimes when things fall apart, it isn't because you're being punished. It's because there's a set of data that you don't have access to until your eyes get opened, until you're exposed to a certain experience, until you can walk through a particular journey. And I know that doesn't sound very nurturing or encouraging, like, oh, okay, sign up for more SAPRA so that I can finally get some answers. No, thank you. And Giovanni, I'm looking at your face and I'm remembering the conversation that we had where you were talking about some of the stuff that was happening and your dissatisfaction with it. And I was like, oh, you're talking like pain is a glitch in the matrix. And you're like, yeah, I'm not supposed to be going through these inconveniences and this pain and heart pain and heartache and disappointment. What in the world? I signed up for this. Here's what I'm going to say. I want you to imagine that your entire life is like going to the gym, like your fitness journey, right? And in order for you to reach a particular goal, diet-wise or athleticism, maybe you want to run a particular pace, maybe you want to lift a particular weight, maybe you want to win a particular milestone or whatever the case may be. In order to do that, you have to subject yourself to certain disciplines. And in that discipline, lifting a particular weight or whatever, you might notice some lactic acid buildup in your muscles, right? It's uncomfortable. Sometimes you lift so fast and so heavy that you become sore and it becomes hard to move. And if pain was a signifier in that sense, pain in that sense is a signifier that you pushed past your limits and your body has to reintegrate itself for this new capacity. It's not a symbol of stopping. Because if you were to stop at the level that you get lactic acid buildup, or pain or soreness in your muscles, you'll never reach the championship. In fact, once you get over that particular level of lifting, the next one's gonna make you sore just as much. You don't get used to it. You keep pushing, right? So I wanna open this up to the conversation of where you are when things fall apart. Do you revert back to self-preservation? Do you get curious? Do you have your select few people that you can lean on so that you can kind of like get some grist for the journey and keep going? Where are you with all of this? And Gio, I see your hand raised. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. So there was something that was kind of coming up for me as you were sharing. Um, and interestingly, I sort of have been thinking about it lately. And so it's interesting that things like show up like that sometimes. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this, or a perspective on it. What I was hearing is that we were sort of pointing to this aspect that pain or crisis, if you will, for a person, or pain, it is sort of a moment in time necessary for the possibility of what's next, for like a possibility for what's next. Like, and as I look in my life, Monikah, I see it like the most difficult and darkest emotionally and physical moments of my life have sort of built for me a layer of strength that it's that I am so grateful for now. But while I was going through it, I I had the right questions within me, like a question, like this is happening for a reason. This is part of an opportunity to see something about myself. This is like I had the right questions. I guess thanks to growth and development, I had the right questions for me. But the while the journey was happening, man, I really wish what I'm saying right now is not like true. Like
Mm.
you've got to go through the crisis so that you can build the next step in your life, the next level in your life, because some crises are like Jesus.
I know. Nothing to sneeze at, right? It's like, what? Who? What? No, I thought I was finished suffering. I've done enough of that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there is this aspect that I'm having a hard time aligning with it and hoping. I mean, nothing is true, but here's what I'm going to say. There's this aspect about pain
Mm-hmm.
that has given me access to growing spiritually.
Yeah.
And it's like I want to continue to grow spiritually. I do, but I don't want that
But
kind of
not with
pain.
you, Pain. Thank you, buddy. But I've had enough of you.
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of showing up for me right now.
Yes, right. Yeah. Um, how do I say this without sounding dismissive? Because that's where my hesitation comes from. I say it. I think what makes it's not that the pain is less. Just like I'm going to use that analogy of fitness as well, like your tennis journey, etc. It's not that the game gets easier. It's that you get better, right? And so in the same way, it's not that the pain lessens, it's that you expand your capacity for pain. And so you you know that I used to lead a team of people in a transformational training when somebody would come to me with something troublesome. I would say, instead of taking stuff off of your plate, become a bigger plate. And the whole idea of that is how do I do that? Because that sounds magical, but what are the actual logistical, practical steps to do that in real life? Here's some of it. One is getting curious, because once you know the law and you know that if it's in front of me, it must have come from my own consciousness in some way or form. I don't know yet how, but I know that it did. So then you get curious about, well, what about me and my consciousness has magnetized this situation to me? What would be and sometimes this is where it feels dismissive, because sometimes it sounds as though you're blaming somebody for their own suffering to say that. And that's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is getting curious about, what is this here to teach me? What is this here to build in me? So nobody signs up for bankruptcy, nobody signs up for death, nobody signs up for divorce, nobody signs up for, loss of your reputation, et cetera, et cetera. But what would be, if there is any, what would be the blessing in disguise of handling all of this? Maybe the blessing in disguise is to know what it's like to pour your heart out into a particular career or into a particular reputation, and to know that that's not who you are. You are not what you do. Who you are is much bigger than your performance. And so when you lose the performance, you're going to have to hang on to something else. And that's the only way that you could discover that you're bigger than your performance, if the performance gets taken away, right? So then you learn, well, since I don't like the pain of having my performance taken away, how about I just don't get attached in the first place? And then you learn the next time that you love something to pour yourself into it and not be attached. Or to see it in a larger point of view, and your unconditionality increases. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You can finish your thought, and then I want to say something really
Okay.
cool.
Your unconditionality increases, your acceptance increases, your patience increases, because then you're like, okay, I remember that the reason I stumbled last time was because I was too attached to this thing. So let me get away from the attachment and see what else is there. and then you're available for the next lesson. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, wow, that is brilliant, man. What I want to say about what I'm hearing, um, is that you sort of were able to recreate my entire life journey.
Oh, look at that. Cliff notes.
My but you were sort of recreating my growth and development, if you will, but I couldn't language it. I couldn't verbalize what has been my experience of growing. And I think you were pointing to it. And what I want to say is, yes, I did get better, but I couldn't see, well, what did I get better at?
Mm-hmm.
Is it anticipating? Is it, I can't quite anticipate pain because it always comes. And what you're pointing to is, I did get better at not being attached to those things I love. I did get better at that. And I think that that's what you're pointing to. What's showing up for me is the possibility of fulfillment, enlightenment, realization, and happiness. It's for me to play all out with those things that I have my life be fulfilled, play all out while not being attached at all
Mm-hmm.
to the possibility of my relationship, to the
Mm-hmm.
possibility of my love for my children, to the possibility of the game with what company. How do you play all out without being attached at all? Is what one gets better at.
Yes.
Anyway, that's what I'm hearing.
And there's a lot of power in that. I think we grow up in this culture. In this culture, we celebrate attachment. We synonymize attachment with devotion. And if you're not attached, then somehow you're not loving or devoted to or committed or convicted about whatever it is that you're supposed to be attached. We don't celebrate detachment or non-attachment, I should say, right? And yet, if you watch some people dancing, you're going to have to be fluid. You're going to have to move. Otherwise, you might break a bone if you don't move. If you're holding a particular position in a sporting event or you have to move your body in order to hit the ball in a particular way in order to be able to defend territory in football or whatever the case may be. That movement is just the dynamism of life. And the reason why that feels like suffering is because you had a previous idea in mind, and that's not what's happening in the field.
Like that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, no kidding. For some people, some things that happen, I really wish they didn't happen.
Yes, exactly. And we're seeing that even now, right? If you look at the dispassionate way that nature contains itself, nature contains both the blossoming of trees and flowers and beautiful and the birth of baby calves and things like that. But it also contains a cheetah completely ripping the throat out of its prey.
Yeah.
Right? The only difference is, huh?
Or the lion killing a cub, or
right.
the storm killing thousands of people.
Well, but here's the thing, that in nature, destruction only happens when it is necessary. It isn't a punishment. It isn't retaliatory.
Would you say necessary wouldn't be a meaning that only human beings can bring? Here's what I'm pointing to. Like, I'm going to do a trivial example and maybe relevant, so you can say, okay, Gio, another sermon for another thing. But for example, the dinosaurs, they're completely extinct. Completely extinct. A complete destruction of that species. I don't know if necessary. Or, there's hundreds of animals that no longer exist. Was it necessary? Or maybe just is.
Maybe it just is. Oh, but also a lot of that has to do with man-made involvement. I'm talking about specifically nature, right? So So what I mean by that is, for example, if there's too much rustle, too much leaves, too much, whatever, something will come, a hurricane or rains, snow will come, etc., and it'll dry up that extra leaves, those extra, like it'll just dry it up. But the point that I was making is that nature's destruction isn't punitive. It's not like, oh, you're disrespecting me. I'm going to get your entire forest and I'm going to kill every single lion in here. And I'm going to, it's not like that. It's like, oh, this is unnecessary. Snuff it out. But we continue living and we continue prospering. And even if an entire species is extinct, and some of that is man-made behavior, even when that is happening, nature still continues doing what nature does. It does not change its nature just because you're a fool, just because you're destructive, right? And so in the same way, I liken that to a characteristic of God, that it's like, can I be that steady and that reliable in what I do and how I adhere to principle, regardless if somebody's being petty, violent, greedy, etc.? That's the question from a spiritual perspective for us here in Spiritual Matters Thursday, is can I be steady even when things fall apart? Can I be loving even when I don't perceive love coming from the person I love? Can I be devoted to my business even when it's not profitable? Can I be devoted to my career even when it doesn't look like I'm going to get, you might not get another award for the rest of your life. Do you need that external validation in order for you to show up at your best? Are you only doing it for claps and applause? Or are you doing it because it's the calling on your life? All of us have to have that private reckoning and get clear on, what are you doing this for? Because if you're just doing it for external validation and for claps and applause, go join a circus. They'll clap for you there. It's easier and you don't have to suffer so much. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And even there, one can give their best without the validation, even at the church.
Yeah, now you have a new set of questions. Right? Because then it's like, now I'm the transaction. Oh, so you were okay with transactions when it was outside. When you're commoditizing yourself, now all of a sudden you feel a loss of value. Okay, well, again, but you don't know that. You don't have access to that level of questions until you have pushed to that level. And a lot of us just want the entire journey and we want to know the entire experience without moving a finger. That's not how that works. You're going to have to walk in order for you to know what's down the road. Yeah. And sometimes that includes suffering. Sometimes that includes pain. Sometimes that includes disappointment. And what I'm saying is that the highs are so amazing that they're worth the lows. And the composite, the collection of the legacy that you are and the legacy that you leave behind is worth the trouble it took to get there. Your love is worth its trouble. Your acceptance of yourself is worth its trouble. And you are worth the trouble. The chiseling is actually another devotion. The pain is actually another devotion to the greater part of you. And listen, it's not always easy to believe it when you're going through it, to your point, right? But Lord, when you go through it enough, eventually you become conscious so that the next time that you're in pain, the next time that you're suffering, you're like, this too shall pass, right? Yeah. This was a juicy conversation, Gio. Thank you for playing with me today. Thank you for playing with me, and thank you all for playing with me today. I want you to have some contemplation time about this for yourself. I want you to have some contemplation time about your relationship to things falling apart. And what do you define as things falling apart? Because your falling apart might just be you're minorly inconvenienced and you're not used to suffering. So just a little deviation from your plan is like, wait a minute, what? And then there are some people who are so used to suffering that, another tragedy is nothing. So I want you to spend some time in contemplation about, when you squeeze an orange, you're just going to get orange juice, whether it's hot, cold, up, down, et cetera, because that's what's inside. But what happens when somebody or something or an experience squeezes the juice out of you? What comes out? And so when you think about that, then you start to define for yourself the stand that you are in the world and what people can rely on you for. Right? So thank you so much again for hanging out with us, for letting me run my mouth. Today I didn't have much conversation except with Gio, and Gio was nice enough to play with us. Remember to love generously, laugh a lot, stress less, give more, exercise, sleep, and always check your assumptions. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Audit your assumptions. Make sure. Sometimes those assumptions, Lord, they have to grow. They have to evolve, so that you can be a better conduit and a better fiduciary and trusted angel of the gift that you are meant to live and leave here in the world. Thank you so much for being with us today at the Daily Huddle. See you next time.
Thank you, Dr. Ogando. Thank you so much.
Thank you.